The second scenario that I want to put forward to you that will reveal and provide insight into some of the HR challenges, one of the many HR challenges that can emerge in this new world of work and employment, the new globalized world and employment, comes from a British telecommunications company that requires a constant flow of software developers, experienced software engineers who can not only keep the systems running, but also can develop in an innovative manner new forms of software that can help develop products in an expanding market. And if you look at the telecommunications market at the moment, there is a clear move towards consumer telecoms market, a clear move to what is called quad play, the integration of 4 different types of service for customers. It's quite simple: broadband, mobile telephony, cable and landline. These 4 being bundled together in consumer packages. And this may come as a bit of a surprise, but in this country there are not sufficient numbers of skilled software engineers to be able to meet the requirements of companies. This is true of Glasgow. So imagine for a moment, you are an HR manager based in recruitment and talent management, attempting to ensure that you have sufficient supplies of software engineers and developers. As a result of the labour market situation, you are compelled to attempt to recruit from overseas, to bring into the UK skilled software engineers with the capabilities and ability to fit in to your production systems. The question comes, it gets raised, where do you go? It may be that you go to Eastern Europe, or, as has been the case more recently, that you go and attempt to recruit from India, say, skilled software engineers who exist in quite large numbers in that country, many of whom are in fact working in remote locations for UK and US companies on software development. So you need these experienced people. So what do? You need to hire from Bangalore, from Chennai, from Mumbai, from the Indian cities. So how do you go about it? Do you hire directly, or do you go through agents? Do you go to companies where these software engineers are already working, or do you begin to try to access people who are college graduates? There are a number of choices, of course, that you have to make. And once you make the recruitment decision and you hire people, there are a whole series of HR issues that arise from this. What contracts do you put these engineers on? And they tend to be short-term contracts. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? How do you negotiate visas with UK BA? For if it is the case that capital and investment and technology can move quite quickly and rapidly and seamlessly between countries, then it's not true that people and labour can move seamlessly between countries. The regulatory requirements and the need to get work visas can hold back the process of recruitment. Once these engineers come to the UK, once they come to Glasgow, where do they live? These are migratory workers who require accommodation and a degree of social support. In terms of the processes of work, how are they then integrated into the team working that takes place on the ground in the workplaces? What cultural and linguistic difficulties must be overcome for them to be productive workers? What are the pay increases? There are issues of equity and equitability here, that they should not be paid less than the workers in the UK who are doing the same job. If it's a telecommunications environment, there may be issues of negotiation with the trade unions that are required by human resource management to undertake in order to ensure that existing contractual requirements with the existing workforce are maintained. So in total, therefore, what you have is what appears to be a very simple challenge. How do we recruit from overseas a number of software developers to come to work in our facilities? And here, a whole series of really quite complex HR issues emerge in the course of carrying out this decision. I want to move on now to pulling out some of the information and some insight from my own research that I have conducted into call centres and into call centres and globalisation. And what emerges from this understanding of how call centres processes have been moved or migrated from the UK to India, particularly, you can see contrasting human resource management and managing issues and problems arising in both places. I want to start, though, with the process. Is it possible to lift and shift a process from the UK to India and make it seamless and substitutable? And that question, lifting a process and shifting it, when a call centre depends absolutely on the interaction of voice, of people who work on the front line connecting the organisation with the customer. And I'm going to identify some of the issues and the challenges that emerge. What control would you, as an HR manager in this country, have over the recruitment, the training, the retention, the talent acquisition, if you like, of people to work in these processes in India? Here's another more mundane question. How many managers from the UK would go over to India to help the startup of the process? How long would they go for? How much cost is involved in this? How is it possible for the knowledge to be transmitted to these new call handlers, these new agents working in remote locations? How many trainers would you send over to help coach them in terms of accents and language and interaction? These are just some of the questions of relocating the process. And of course, what are some of the challenges, the HR challenges that might happen domestically, at home if you like? It's possible, and it has happened, that the site in which the call centre in the UK is located has to be downsized. Perhaps there have to be redundancies, lost jobs, and so on. Many jobs have been lost through offshoring. What might be the implications for the morale and the motivation of the workforce who remain in this country? The other thing that offshoring means is a reorganisation, a more general reorganisation of processes. You may now have different work being moved to different parts of the country. Another managerial problem. How do you maintain control at a distance of the operators in India who are serving customers in the UK? The traditional method for doing this was something called a service level agreement that prescribes the quantity and the quality of calls that is delivered from India. Now, this seems a simple thing. Indian agents have to produce or answer a certain number of calls in a certain quality with certain performance management criteria over a period of time. But yet, how can this be guaranteed when the managers who are trying to ensure that this happens to UK customers are so remote? Is it possible to rely simply on managers on the ground? Human resource management in this country has to have detailed knowledge of labour markets, not just in its own country, but also in a remote country as well. And those are some of the challenges in this country. If you can imagine that the challenges for a human resource manager in India might be how to recruit, how to retain people. Attrition or labour turnover in India is often running at 75, perhaps even 100%. These are real problems in terms of continuity and the quality of service. So you have a whole set of problems in one country mirrored by a set of challenges in another country. What this unpicks, therefore, is the complexity of managing contact centre activities across a number of different locations. As I mentioned at the outset, I would draw this presentation to a close by focusing on a number of points of reflection that are important for you in terms of HRM and management in an increasingly internationalised world. These are quite general points, and I would like you to think through what they might mean in concrete terms. First of all, it means that managers in the world of work increasingly must have a far greater sense and understanding of geography and place than that they had hitherto when production was more localised. You have to have an imagination, an understanding of where the production or the service units that you are working in, where they have transnational operations, where they have service chains that extend to other geographies. It helps if you can go there and understand them, but it helps that you understand that you are a global manager and not just a local manager. The second thing I want you to think about is this question, which follows from the first, of cultural awareness. Being aware of the cultural differences that exist between countries and the sorts of implications this might have for the practice of business. Okay? You cannot assume the transferability of culture from one place to another in a seamless manner. The third element of reflection is again related to the previous two. It's about developing an empathy and an understanding of different cultures, the ways in which people might behave or conduct themselves in a different culture. And here what we're talking about with the global dimension is the intersection, the interaction of global production networks and service chains with particular localities. And you cannot assume ethnocentrically that the host country, the developed country, is necessarily going to be right when services and processes are exported and migrated overseas. Equally, it is necessary to understand, imagine this from the other side, empathy and understanding. It could be that you end up working for a Japanese or an Indian or an American multinational company in this country. And you will obviously have to be aware of the cultural practices, the dominant cultural attributes that come with that organisation when they locate here. Fourthly, again related, the development of communication skills. If you are a manager whose responsibility it is to connect with different sources of activity, different sites of manufacturing or servicing across the world, then clearly communications are of great importance. How often do you meet face to face? Can you rely upon Skype to overcome distance? Email, text, telephone, what forms of communication? The architecture of communication is important. But so too, and reflect upon this, about how important it is to be an effective communicator, not just simply using the techniques, but being able to transmit and listen to what is said back to you. And this is often not a question of language. It's a question of emotional intelligence, and it's a question of empathy and understanding. Related to that, of course, is the question of time zone, where people are at, when you can communicate, and so on. The final point I want you to think about as well is the flexibility requirement, that the strategic priorities for organisations as they go global, or you become a global player, exist. But so too is there a flexibility and a sense of the ad hoc and a requirement to be quick on the feet and thinking in order to be able to respond to the kind of global needs. So I'm emphasising here with a number of general principles, not hard and fast rules, a sense of understanding of geography and place, cultural awareness, empathy and understanding, communication skills of all kinds, a flexibility to this shifting, changing landscape of global business, and marrying a strategic sense with a sense of the tactical, the responsive, and the ad hoc.